Lisa Martinez rubbed her tired eyes as she stared at the monitor screens in front of her. The night shift at Galileo 7 was always quiet, but tonight felt different. The deep space monitoring station drifted silently through the void, its sensors reaching out into the darkness between stars. She had been working communications for 3 years now, and most nights were the same. Empty space chatter, routine check-ins from cargo ships, and the occasional distress beacon from some unlucky trader who had engine trouble. Nothing exciting ever happened out here on the edge of human space. The coffee in her mug had gone cold hours ago, but Lisa kept sipping it anyway. Commander Jake Thompson would be making his rounds soon, and she needed to look alert. The station. Commander was strict about his people staying sharp during their shifts, even when nothing was happening. A soft beep from her console made Lisa sit up straight. One of the long-range sensors had picked up something. She frowned at the display, watching the signal strength fluctuate. It was weak, probably just interference from a distant pulsar or some space debris hitting a communication satellite. But then it beeped again, and again. Lisa leaned forward, her fingers dancing across the control panel. The signal was coming from deep space, far beyond any known human settlements. She adjusted the filters and tried to clean up the reception. The beeping became more regular, almost like a pattern. "That's weird," she muttered to herself. The signal was definitely artificial. Natural space phenomena did not make patterns like this. Someone or something was transmitting, and they were far from home. Lisa checked her star charts and felt her stomach drop. The signal was coming from the direction of the Kepler 442 system, over 1,200 light-years away. She had never heard of any human ships traveling that far. Hell, the farthest human colony was only about 200 light-years from Earth. This signal was coming from completely unexplored space. Lisa's hands trembled slightly as she began recording the transmission. Whatever this was, it was big. First contact protocols started running through her mind, but she pushed those thoughts away. She needed more data before jumping to conclusions. The pattern continued for several minutes, then stopped. Lisa held her breath, waiting. Just when she thought it was over, the signal came back stronger than before. This time, she could make out what sounded like mathematical sequences buried in the static, prime numbers. Someone was broadcasting prime numbers. Her heart started pounding. Only an intelligent species would use mathematics as a universal language. This was not a pulsar or space debris. This was a message from someone who wanted to be found. Heavy footsteps in the corridor announced Commander Thompson's approach. Lisa quickly saved her recordings and tried to look casual as the tall, gray-haired officer entered the communications bay. "How's it looking out there, Martinez?" Thompson asked, glancing at her screens. "Pretty quiet, sir. Just the usual background. Noise and—" Lisa hesitated. Should she tell him about the signal? If she was wrong, she would look like an idiot. If she was right, this could change everything. Thompson noticed her pause. "Something wrong?" "I picked up an unusual transmission about 20 minutes ago, sir. It seemed artificial, but it's coming. From way outside human space. Probably just a glitch in the sensors." The commander moved closer to her station. "Let me hear it." Lisa played back the recording, watching Thompson's face as the strange beeping filled the room. His expression grew more serious with each repetition of the pattern. "That's not a glitch," he said quietly. "Play it again." They listened to the signal 3 more times. Thompson was no expert in xenolinguistics, but he had been in space long enough to know the difference between natural phenomena and artificial transmissions. "Get Dr. Foster down here," he ordered. "Right now." Lisa's fingers flew over her communication panel, sending an urgent message to the station's xenolinguistics expert. Dr. Amanda Foster had been assigned to Galileo 7 just in case something like this ever happened, though nobody really expected it to. While they waited, Lisa continued monitoring the signal. It had changed again, becoming more complex. Numbers were being replaced by what looked like star charts and some kind of biological data. Whoever was sending this message was trying very hard to communicate. Dr. Foster arrived within minutes, still pulling on her lab coat over her pajamas. She was a small woman with short brown hair and sharp green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "What do we have?" she asked, settling into the chair next to Lisa. "Unknown transmission from the Kepler 442 system," Thompson replied. "Mathematical patterns, possibly first contact." Foster's eyes went wide. She had spent her entire career hoping for this moment, and now it was happening on a routine night shift in the middle of nowhere. "Let me see the data," she said. Lisa transferred the recordings to Foster's workstation, and the scientist immediately began running them through her analysis programs. The computer worked to isolate patterns and translate the mathematical sequences into something humans could understand. "My God," Foster whispered as the first results appeared on her screen. "They're using base 10 mathematics, just like us. And these star charts? They're showing us exactly where they are." The three humans stared at the screen as more data scrolled past. Biological information began appearing, showing the anatomy and physiology of a species unlike anything in Earth's databases. They were tall, thin beings with 4 arms and large eyes adapted for low light conditions. But it was the next part of the message that made Foster's blood run cold. "Commander," she said, her voice shaking, "I think this is a distress call." The transmission had changed again. Now it showed images of destruction, burning cities, and what looked like hunting parties chasing the 4-armed beings through forests and across open plains. The mathematical sequences had become more desperate, repeating over and over like a scream for help. Thompson grabbed the nearest communication panel. "This is Galileo 7 calling Earth Defense Command. Priority Alpha. We have a potential first. Contact situation requiring immediate attention." The response came back within seconds. "Earth Defense Command receiving. Go ahead, Galileo 7. We've intercepted what appears to be an alien distress call from the Kepler 442 system. Request immediate contact with Captain Sullivan and the Xenobiology Department." There was a long pause before the reply came through. "Message received and understood. Stand by for priority channel connection." Lisa watched her screens as the alien signal continued broadcasting its desperate plea. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, an entire species was crying out for help. They had sent their message into the void, hoping that someone, anyone, would hear them and care enough to respond. She looked at Dr. Foster, who was still analyzing the biological data. The scientist's face was pale, and her hands were shaking as she worked. "What are you seeing?" Lisa asked quietly. Foster turned to face her, and Lisa saw something she had never expected to see in the older woman's eyes. Pure terror. "They're herbivores," Foster said. "Completely peaceful. No weapons, no military technology, nothing that could be used for warfare. And someone is hunting them." The signal continued broadcasting as the three humans processed what they were seeing. An entire species was being exterminated, and they had managed to send out one last desperate call for help before their civilization was completely destroyed. Thompson was already on the communication line with Earth Defense Command requesting immediate priority status for the transmission. Captain Ryan Sullivan would need to see this data as soon as possible. Lisa stared at the star charts showing the location of the Kepler 442 system. 1,200 light-years away. It might as well have been on the other side of the universe. Even if Earth wanted to help, how could they possibly reach these beings in time? But as she watched the desperate mathematical pleas scrolling across her screen, Lisa Martinez realized that distance might not matter. Humanity had spent centuries dreaming of first contact with alien life. Now that moment had arrived, and it was not the peaceful meeting that everyone had imagined. It was a cry for help from the darkness. Ambassador Patricia Wells stood in the center of the massive chamber aboard Unity Prime, the orbital station that served as headquarters for the Galactic Council. The circular room stretched up several stories, with viewing galleries arranged in tiers around the central speaking platform. Representatives from dozens of alien species filled the seats, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. Patricia had been Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council for 5 years, and she had never called for an emergency session before. The weight of what she was about to present made her stomach tight with nervous energy. High Counselor Zerthak of the Altarian Republic floated in his ceremonial chair at the head of the chamber. His species looked like tall, thin trees with bark-like skin and glowing amber eyes. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had led the council for over 3 decades. "The emergency session is now in order," Zerthak announced. "Ambassador Wells of the Human Commonwealth, you have requested urgent consideration of a matter affecting galactic security. The floor is yours." Patricia activated her holographic display, and the alien distress signal began playing for the assembled representatives. The mathematical sequences and star charts filled the air above the speaking platform, followed by the biological data and images of destruction that Dr. Foster had decoded. "Honored counselors," Patricia began, 48 hours ago, human monitoring stations intercepted this transmission from the Kepler 442 system. Our analysis indicates that an intelligent species called the Villani are being systematically exterminated by raiders identified as the Keth Mori. Murmurs rippled through the chamber as various species recognized the names. Patricia noticed that several representatives seemed uncomfortable, shifting in their seats or exchanging glances with their neighbors. The holographic display showed the Villani homeworld as it had been before the attacks, a green, peaceful planet with cities that looked more like gardens than urban centers. Then came the images of burning forests and empty settlements. "The Villani appear to be a completely peaceful species," Patricia continued. "Their technology is advanced in areas like medicine, agriculture, and environmental management, but they have no weapons systems or military capabilities. They are being hunted to extinction by a predator species that views them as sport." High Counselor Zerthak's amber eyes dimmed slightly. "Ambassador Wells, the Council appreciates your concern for this tragic situation. However, the Kepler 442 system lies far outside established territorial boundaries. The species you mention have not applied for Council membership or protection. With respect, High Counselor, that's because they're being slaughtered before they can make contact with the rest of the galaxy." A new voice spoke from the upper galleries. "The Keth Mori operate under ancient hunting privileges," said Representative Mordak of the Hegemony Collective. "His species looked like oversized crabs with metallic shells and multiple eyes on stalks. These privileges are recognized by treaty and have been respected for over 400 years. Patricia felt her anger, rising but kept her voice level. "You're talking about genocide, Representative Mordak. The systematic extermination of an entire species." "The natural order of the galaxy," replied Counselor Vexani of the Crystalline Collective. Her crystalline form sparkled as she spoke, each word creating rainbow patterns in her translucent body. "Strong species survive, weak species do not. This has been the way of things for millions of years." More voices joined the discussion, and Patricia realized with growing horror that the Council was not just refusing to help the Villani, they were actively defending the right of the Keth Mori to hunt them. "The resources required for an intervention in the Kepler system would be enormous," said another representative. "The distance alone makes it impractical. Even if we could reach them in time, which is doubtful, the cost in ships and lives would far exceed any potential benefit." Admiral Karen Brooks had been sitting quietly in the human delegations section, but now she stood up. Patricia knew the Admiral well enough to recognize the dangerous expression on her face. "Potential benefit?" Admiral Brooks asked, her voice carrying clearly across the chamber. "We're talking about saving the lives of an entire species." "What?" kind of cost-benefit analysis puts a price on genocide? High Counselor Zerthak rustled his bark-like skin in what Patricia had learned was a sign of mild annoyance. Admiral Brooks, the Council must consider the greater good of all member species. Resources spent on a futile gesture in the Kepler system are resources that cannot be used to protect established worlds and trade routes. So you're just going to let them die, Admiral Brooks said. It was not a question. The Council will observe. A moment of silence for the unfortunate Villani? Zerthak replied. But we cannot risk our ships and our people for a species that cannot contribute to galactic civilization. Patricia watched in disbelief as the chamber fell silent for exactly 30 seconds. Then Zerthak called for a formal vote on whether to take any action regarding the Villani situation. The results were not even close. 47 species voted against intervention. Only 3 voted in favor, and one of those was humanity. The other 2 were minor species with no military capabilities of their own. The matter is closed, Zerthak announced. The Kepler 442's system will be classified as a natural loss zone, and all Council member species are forbidden from unauthorized military action in that region. Patricia felt something break inside her chest. She had spent 5 years learning to work within the galactic community, respecting their customs and following their rules. She had believed that the Council represented the best hope for peace and cooperation among the stars. Now she understood that she had been wrong. The Galactic Council was not a force for good in the universe. It was a collection of species that had grown comfortable with the status quo, even when that status quo included genocide. The human delegation withdraws from this session, Patricia announced, her voice echoing through the suddenly quiet chamber. She gathered her materials and walked toward the exit, followed by Admiral Brooks and the rest of the human diplomatic team. Behind them, the chamber erupted in surprised chatter as representatives tried to understand what had just happened. In the corridor outside, Admiral Brooks grabbed Patricia's arm. "That was the right call," she said. "But you know what this means?" Patricia nodded. "It means we're on our own." They made their way to the secure communication room that Earth maintained aboard Unity Prime. Patricia composed an encrypted message to President Helen Carter, while Admiral Brooks contacted Earth Defense Command directly. "Priority Alpha message to President Carter," Patricia dictated. "The Galactic Council has refused to take action regarding the Villani genocide. All member species are forbidden from intervention. The human delegation is withdrawing from Council discussions on this matter. Request immediate policy guidance." Admiral Brooks finished her own communication and turned to Patricia. "Fleet Command wants to know if this is a formal break with the Council." "Not yet," Patricia replied. "But if Earth decides to act, we'll be violating Council law. That could mean expulsion from the galactic community." "Would that be such a bad thing?" Admiral Brooks asked quietly. Patricia thought about the images from the Villani homeworld. The burning cities, the empty settlements, the desperate mathematical pleas broadcast into the darkness. Then she thought about the cold calculation she had just witnessed in the Council chamber, the casual dismissal of an entire species as not worth saving. "Maybe not," she said. The response from Earth came faster than expected. President Carter's message was brief and direct. "Stand by for further instructions. Do not commit to any Council actions regarding the Kepler situation." Admiral Brooks received an even shorter message from Fleet Command. "Report to secure facilities immediately. Operational briefing authorized." As they prepared to leave Unity Prime, Patricia looked back at the Council chamber where representatives were still discussing the failed human proposal. Some seemed amused by humanity's emotional reaction. Others appeared concerned about the implications of a Council member openly defying established policy. None of them seemed to care about the Villani who were dying while they debated. Patricia had joined the diplomatic service because she believed in the power of words and negotiation to solve problems. She had always preferred talking to fighting, compromise to conflict. But as she walked away from the Galactic Council for what might be the last time, she found herself thinking about something her grandfather had told her when she was young. He had been a soldier in one of Earth's last wars, and he had seen terrible things done by people who believed they were following the rules. Sometimes, he had said, doing the right thing means breaking the law. And sometimes, the people making the laws are the ones who need to be stopped. Patricia had never understood what he meant until now. The Galactic Council had shown its true nature today. They were not peacekeepers or protectors of justice. They were comfortable bureaucrats who had forgotten what it meant to fight for something bigger than themselves. But humanity had not forgotten. And if the Council would not act to save the Volani, then humanity would act alone. The question was whether Earth was ready to face the consequences of defying the most powerful political organization in the galaxy. President Helen Carter descended the steps into the underground bunker beneath Washington, D.C., her footsteps echoing in the concrete corridor. The Global Defense Council had not been called into emergency session since the Proxima crisis 12 years ago, and never for a situation quite like this one. The circular briefing room was carved deep into the bedrock beneath the Capitol, designed to survive anything short of a direct hit from a planet-killer weapon. The walls were lined with screens showing real-time data from across human space, and the conference table could accommodate the 30 most important people in Earth's government and military. They were all here tonight. General Marcus Stone, head of Terran Fleet Command, stood at attention near the main display screen. His weathered face showed the strain of the past 48 hours, during which he had been running combat readiness assessments on every ship in the human fleet. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, director of xenobiology, sat at the table reviewing the translated Volani transmissions on her tablet. She had been analyzing the alien data non-stop since it arrived from Galileo 7, and her findings were disturbing. Admiral Brooks had arrived just 20 minutes ago on the fastest ship available, still wearing her dress uniform from the council session. She looked like she had not slept since leaving Unity Prime. President Carter took her seat at the head of the table and activated the secure communication system. This briefing is classified at the highest level. What we discuss here tonight may determine humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. She gestured to Admiral Brooks. Karen, give us the situation from the Council. Admiral Brooks stood and activated the holographic projector. The Volani distress signal played, once again, but now it included additional data that human computers had decoded during the past 2 days. The Galactic Council voted 47-3 against any intervention in the Kepler 442 system, Brooks reported. They have classified it as a natural loss zone and forbidden any member species from taking military action. The general attitude was that the Volani are too weak to be worth saving. Angry murmurs filled the room. Defense Secretary Robert Chen slammed his hand on the table. They're talking about genocide like it's a natural disaster. It gets worse, Admiral Brooks continued. Several council species are actively supporting the Keth Mori through resource treaties and navigation assistance. This isn't just neglect, it's collaboration. President Carter turned to Dr. Rodriguez. Elena, what have you learned about the Volani? The xenobiologist stood and her data appeared on the main screen. The Volani are remarkable, Madam President. Their civilization is over 8,000 years old, but they have never developed weapons or military technology of any kind. They are completely herbivorous, and their culture appears to be built around concepts of harmony and cooperation. Images of Volani cities appeared on the screen, beautiful structures that looked more like living gardens than buildings, with flowing architecture that seemed to grow from the landscape itself. Their medical technology is centuries ahead of ours, Dr. Rodriguez continued. Their agricultural systems can feed billions without damaging the environment. They have developed sustainable energy sources that we can barely understand. In terms of pure scientific advancement, they may be the most accomplished species we've encountered. But no weapons, General Stone observed grimly. None at all. Their entire philosophical framework is based on the idea that intelligence eliminates the need for violence. They cannot comprehend a species that would attack them for sport. The screen changed to show intercepted Keth-Mori communications. The predator species looked like oversized reptiles with cybernetic enhancements and advanced weapons grafted directly into their bodies. The Keth-Mori are the opposite, Dr. Rodriguez explained. Their entire culture revolves around hunting and conquest. They view the Villani as the perfect prey, intelligent enough to be challenging, but too peaceful to fight back effectively. How many Villani are left? President Carter asked quietly. Based on the transmission data, we estimate that approximately 2.5 million survivors are hiding on their homeworld. 6 months ago, their population was over 50 million. The room fell silent as the numbers sank in. An entire civilization was being systematically exterminated while the galactic community watched and did nothing. Secretary of State Linda Morrison spoke up from across the table. Madam President, we need to consider the political implications. If we act without council approval, we could be expelled from the galactic community. That would mean no more trade agreements, no more technology exchanges, no more diplomatic protection. It would also mean no more having to sit in meetings where genocide is discussed as an acceptable business practice, Admiral Brooks replied. Sharply, General Stone activated his own display, showing the current disposition of human military forces. I've been running preliminary assessments on a rescue operation. The challenges are enormous. The screen showed a three-dimensional map of known space, with the Kepler 442 system highlighted in red far beyond the edge of human territory. Distance is our biggest problem, Stone continued. Even with our fastest ships, we're looking at a 3-month journey each way. We would be operating completely outside our supply lines, with no hope of reinforcement if things go wrong. What? About opposition? Carter asked. Intelligence suggests the Keth-Mori have at least 60 combat vessels in the system, including several Dreadnought-class ships. Their technology is more advanced than ours, and they have numerical superiority. Secretary? Morrison leaned forward. So you're telling us that we would be risking our entire fleet to save a species we've never met, while violating galactic law and potentially starting a war with the Galactic Council? That's correct, General Stone replied. Then this is madness, Morrison said. We cannot risk human civilization for an alien species, no matter how tragic their situation. The room erupted in heated debate. Some argued that humanity had a moral obligation to act, while others insisted that Earth's first responsibility was to its own people. The discussion grew louder and more passionate as the minutes passed. President Carter finally called for quiet. Before we make any decisions, I want to hear the rest of the Villani transmission. Elena, play the final segment. Dr. Rodriguez hesitated. Madam President, this portion is difficult to hear. Play it. The room's speakers crackled to life, with sounds that human computers had translated into audio. At first, it was just the mathematical sequences they had heard before, but then other sounds began to emerge from the static. Voices. Young voices speaking in a language that the computers could not fully translate, but whose meaning was unmistakable. They were the voices of Villani children, calling out in the darkness, begging for someone to help them. The transmission continued for several minutes, growing weaker and more desperate as it progressed. The children were asking why no one was coming to save them, why the galaxy had abandoned them to die. When it ended, the briefing room was completely silent. President Carter looked around the table at the faces of her advisors. Some were staring at the floor, unable to meet her eyes. Others were openly weeping. All of them understood that they had just heard the last cry for help from an entire generation of beings who would never live to grow up. I want a vote, Carter said quietly. All in favor of launching a rescue mission to the Kepler 442 system. Hands began rising around the table. Secretary Morrison kept hers down, along with 2 others, But the majority was clear. Even those who had argued against intervention could not ignore what they had just heard. "The motion carries," President Carter announced. "General Stone, I want a full operational plan within 24 hours. Admiral Brooks, contact all department heads and begin immediate mobilization. We're going to bring those children home. The meeting broke up and officials began making urgent phone calls. President Carter remained in her chair, staring at the star chart on the main screen. The red dot marking the Kepler 442 system seemed impossibly far away. Her chief of staff, Andrew Walsh, approached the table. "Madam President, the political risks of this operation are enormous. If we fail, it could mean the end of human participation in galactic civilization." Carter looked up at him with steel in her eyes. "Andrew, I've been in politics for 30 years, and I've made a lot of compromises in the name of pragmatism. But there are some lines you don't cross, and there are some fights you can't walk away from." She stood and gathered her papers. "If saving innocent children from genocide means we get kicked out of the Galactic Club, then maybe we were never meant to be in that club in the first place." As she walked toward the exit, Carter paused and looked back at the screen showing the Villani homeworld. Somewhere on that distant planet, alien children were hiding in caves and ruins, waiting for help that their own galaxy had already decided would never come. But they were wrong. Help was coming, carried by ships crewed by the most stubborn and dangerous species the galaxy had ever encountered. Humanity was going to war. General Marcus Stone stood in the command center of Luna Shipyard, watching the largest military mobilization in human history unfold before his eyes. Through the massive viewing windows, he could see dozens of warships moving into formation, their hulls gleaming under the harsh light of unfiltered sunlight. Protocol 7 had been activated 6 hours ago, and the response was beyond anything Stone had expected. Every major shipyard in the solar system was buzzing with activity as crews worked around the clock to prepare vessels for the long journey to Kepler 442. "Status report," Stone ordered, turning to his aide, Colonel Patricia Baker. 43. "Vessels have confirmed readiness for deployment, sir," Baker replied, reading from her tablet. "The Yorktown is taking on final supplies and should be ready within the hour. All carrier groups are at 90% capacity." Stone nodded and activated the holographic display showing the fleet composition. It was an impressive sight. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, carriers, and support vessels, all painted in the dark gray of the Terran fleet. But impressive. Might not be enough against the Keth Mori. Admiral Catherine Hayes materialized on the communication screen, calling in from the bridge of the Yorktown. She was a stern woman in her 50s with short gray hair and the kind of eyes that had seen too much combat. "General, my ship is ready for departure. The crew is eager to get underway." "How are they handling the mission briefing?" Stone asked. Hayes allowed herself a small smile. "Sir, when I told them we were going to rescue alien children from genocidal predators, I had to turn away volunteers. We've got more people wanting to join this mission than we have ships to carry them." That was the part that both amazed and worried Stone. Word of the Villani situation had spread throughout the fleet despite all attempts at secrecy, and the reaction had been immediate and overwhelming. Officers were volunteering for combat duty, even though they were scheduled for leave. Enlisted personnel were canceling transfers to stay with their units. Even civilian contractors were asking to come along. "Admiral Hayes, you understand the risks we're facing. This fleet will be operating completely outside human space with no possibility of reinforcement or resupply. If something goes wrong, then we'll handle it the way humans always have," Hayes interrupted. "We'll adapt, improvise, and keep fighting until the job is done." Stone switched to another communication channel, connecting with Captain Danny Rodriguez aboard the heavy cruiser Denver. Rodriguez was young for a ship captain, only 35, but he had earned his command through skill and courage during the Titan Rebellion. "Captain Rodriguez, how are your combat systems?" "All weapons systems are green, General. We've loaded extra ammunition and spare parts for the energy cannons. Chief Engineer Williams has also installed the new shield boosters that came out of the Martian research program. Good. You'll need every advantage you can get. The next call was to Captain Mary Johnson, commander of the destroyer squadron. Her ships were smaller and faster than the heavy cruisers, designed for hit-and-run attacks against larger vessels. Captain Johnson, your squadron will be crucial for this operation. The Keth-Mori ships are bigger and tougher than ours, but they've never faced human tactics. Johnson's voice crackled through the communication system with barely contained excitement. We've been drilling non-stop since the mobilization order came through, sir. My captains are ready to show these predators what happens when they pick on innocent people. Stone moved to the engineering section of the command center, where Chief Engineer Tony Williams was coordinating the technical aspects of the deployment. Williams was a big man with grease-stained coveralls and the kind of practical intelligence that made impossible things work. Tony, what's the status on the jump drive modifications? Williams looked up from a complex schematic display. We've managed to install the experimental enhancers on 38 ships, General. It should cut travel time to the Kepler system by about 3 weeks, but I can't guarantee the drives won't burn out during the journey. Risk assessment? Maybe 10% chance of complete drive failure, 30% chance of reduced efficiency. But sir, if we don't take the risk, those alien kids will be dead before we get there. That was the calculation haunting everyone involved in the operation. Every day they spent in preparation or travel was another day of genocide on the Volani, homeworld. Speed was more important than safety, even if it meant losing ships along the way. Dr. Nancy Thompson appeared on another communication screen, calling from the medical bay of the hospital ship Mercy. She was a small woman with kind eyes and steady hands that had saved thousands of lives during her career. General Stone, my medical teams are ready for deployment. We've studied the Volani, biological data, and prepared treatment protocols for both species. We're also carrying extra supplies in case we encounter injuries we haven't anticipated. What about combat casualties? Stone asked grimly. Thompson's expression grew serious. We're prepared for that too, sir. Every medical officer on this mission volunteered specifically because they wanted to help with the rescue operation. They understand the risks. Stone walked to the observation deck overlooking the main assembly area, where the assault carrier Lincoln was taking on its complement of Marine fighters. Captain Steve Mitchell was personally overseeing the loading operations, making sure every piece of equipment was secured properly. The Marines were a sight to behold. They moved with the disciplined efficiency of professional soldiers. But Stone could see something else in their bearing, a sense of purpose that went beyond normal military duty. These men and women were not just following orders. They believed in what they were doing. Colonel Rick Barnes, the Marine commander, joined Stone on the observation deck. Barnes was a veteran of the asteroid wars and had the scars to prove it. How are your people, Colonel? Ready for anything, sir. We've been drilling in zero-G combat and boarding operations. If we have to take Keth-Mori ships by force, we'll be ready. And if you have to fight on the planet's surface? Barnes's expression hardened. General, my Marines have read the intelligence. Reports. They know what the Keth-Mori have been doing to those alien families. I've never seen troops more motivated for a mission. Stone understood what Barnes meant. The intercepted Keth-Mori communications had revealed the true horror of their operations on the Volani homeworld. They were not just killing for resources or territory. They were torturing and hunting civilians for entertainment. Fighter Wing Commander Julie Sanders contacted the command center from her squadron's preparation area. General, all fighter wings are ready for deployment. We've loaded extra fuel pods and modified our weapon systems for extended range combat. What's your assessment of Keth-Mori fighter capabilities? Their ships are more advanced, but their pilots have gotten lazy from hunting defenseless prey. They've never faced opponents who fight back with human creativity and determination. As the final preparations continued, Stone received reports from across the solar system. The Europa yards were contributing support vessels loaded with medical. supplies, and repair equipment. The Martian Defense Force was providing additional fighters and their most experienced pilots. Even the lunar mining colonies were sending volunteer crews for the supply ships. But it was the civilian response that truly amazed him. Merchant captains were volunteering their cargo ships for supply runs. Retired military personnel were requesting reactivation. Families were sending care packages for the crews, along with messages of support for the unknown alien species they were going to save. The final communication came from Earth itself. President Carter appeared on the main screen, broadcasting from the Oval Office. General Stone, the eyes of humanity are on your fleet. You carry with you not just our military might, but our values and our promise that innocent people will never stand alone while we have the power to help them. We won't let you down, Madam President. I know you won't. Bring those children home, Marcus. Stone turned back to the fleet assembly area, where the last ships were moving into formation. The Yorktown led the formation, followed by the heavy cruisers and destroyers. The carriers came next, their fighter bays full of pilots eager for combat. Supply ships and medical vessels took up the rear, protected by the combat units. It was not the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled, but it might be the most important. These ships and crews were carrying more than weapons and supplies. They were carrying the hope of an entire species that had given up believing anyone would come to save them. Admiral Hayes appeared on the communication screen one final time. General, the fleet is ready for departure. All ships report green status across the board. Stone took a deep breath and gave the order that would change human history. Admiral Hayes, you are authorized to begin Operation Rescue Dawn. May God go with you. Thank you, sir. We'll see you when we get back. The massive fleet began moving away from Luna Shipyard, their engines creating brilliant points of light against the darkness of space. Stone watched until the last ship disappeared into hyperspace, carrying humanity's answer to the galaxy's indifference. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, an alien species was about to learn that they were not alone after all. Admiral Catherine Hayes stood on the bridge of the Yorktown, watching the endless tunnel of hyperspace flow past the main view screen. They had been traveling for 6 weeks now, and the fleet was holding together better than anyone had expected. The experimental jump drive modifications were working, cutting their travel time significantly, but 6 weeks in hyperspace was still 6 weeks too long for the Villani children hiding on their dying world. Fleet status report, Hayes ordered, turning to her communications officer. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Davis consulted her displays. All ships are maintaining formation, Admiral. The Denver reports minor drive fluctuations, but Chief Williams says it's nothing serious. The medical ships are running daily drills to keep their teams sharp. Hayes nodded and walked to the tactical station, where Commander Paul Jackson was analyzing the latest intelligence data. Jackson was her best tactical officer, a quiet man who could see patterns in combat situations that others missed. What are you thinking, Paul? The Keth Mori are overconfident, Admiral. They've been hunting defenseless prey for so long that they've forgotten how to fight a real war. Their ship formations are designed for intimidation, not combat efficiency. Hayes studied the holographic display showing known Keth Mori vessel configurations. The Predator ships were indeed impressive, larger than human vessels with more advanced weapons and armor. But Jackson was right about their formations. They were arranged to look threatening rather than to provide mutual support in battle. What about their numbers? 63 confirmed vessels as of our last intelligence. Update. They have us outnumbered, but not by as much as we initially thought. And Admiral... Jackson paused. There's something else. He activated a new display showing intercepted Keth Mori communications. They're calling for reinforcements. Word has gotten out about our fleet, and they're worried. Hayes felt a grim smile cross her face. They should be worried. She opened a fleet-wide communication channel. All ships, this is Admiral Hayes. I want all senior officers to report to their briefing rooms in 1 hour for a tactical update. As her officers prepared for the briefing, Hayes made her way to the observation deck. The Yorktown was old by human standards, but she was a proud ship with a distinguished service record. Her crew had served together for 3 years, and Hayes knew she could count on every one of them. The observation deck was empty except for Dr. Lisa Park, the ship's xenobiologist, who was studying the latest data from the Villani transmissions. Dr. Park was young but brilliant, and she had been working non-stop to understand everything she could about the species they were trying to save. "Any new insights, Doctor?" Dr. Park looked up from her tablet. "Admiral, the more I learn about the Villani, the more remarkable they become. Their society appears to be completely free of violence. They don't even have words in their language for concepts like murder or war. That explains why they were so vulnerable to the Kethmori? Yes, but it also makes them incredibly valuable to the galaxy. Their medical knowledge could extend human lifespans by centuries. Their agricultural techniques could end hunger on dozens of worlds. They represent everything the galactic community claims to value: peace, knowledge, cooperation." Hayes stared out at the swirling colors of hyperspace. "And the Council was willing to let them die because saving them would be expensive. The Kethmori communications we've intercepted suggest they view the Villani as the ultimate trophy. Hunting a species that cannot fight back appeals to their sadistic nature." The tactical briefing began an hour later, with senior officers from across the fleet participating via holographic link. Captain Rodriguez appeared from the Denver, Captain Johnson from her destroyer squadron, and Captain Mitchell from the assault carrier Lincoln. Commander Jackson presented the updated intelligence picture. The Kethmori have concentrated most of their fleet around Villani Prime, the 4th planet in the system. They're using it as a base for hunting parties that systematically sweep the surface for survivors. The display showed orbital patterns and ground-based installations. They have supply depots on the planet's 2 moons and a command station in the asteroid belt. Their ships patrol in groups of 3 or 4, covering different sectors of the system. Captain Rodriguez leaned forward in his chair. "What about planetary defenses?" "None from the Villani. They never developed military technology. The Kethmori have installed their own defensive systems around their bases, but they're designed to stop escaping Villani, not to repel an invasion." Captain Johnson studied the tactical display. "Admiral, I recommend we split our forces. My destroyers can hit their outer patrols while the main fleet engages their heavy units in orbit." Hayes considered the suggestion. "That would leave us vulnerable to their numerical superiority if they concentrate their forces. But it would also force them to split their attention," Captain Mitchell added. "My Marines could use the confusion to launch ground assaults on their hunting camps." The debate continued for over an hour as the officers planned their approach to the Kepler system. Every detail mattered. The Kethmori were more advanced and had home field advantage, but the humans had surprise and motivation on their side. Dr. Park joined the briefing via communication link from her laboratory. "Admirals, I've been analyzing the most recent Villani transmissions. Their population has dropped to under 2 million, and they're running out of places to hide. We may have only days before the Kethmori finish their extermination." The sobering news focused everyone's attention. They were racing against time to save a species that was dying while they traveled through hyperspace. "There's something else," Dr. Park continued. "The Villani appear to have detected our approach. Their latest transmission contains mathematical sequences that could only be a response to our earlier communications. They know we're coming." Hayes felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, alien. Children were counting the days until rescue arrived. They had never seen a human, never heard of Earth, but they were placing their entire species' survival in the hands of strangers. Fighter Wing Commander Sanders joined the discussion from her squadron's ready room. "Admiral, my pilots have been running combat simulations based on the Kethmori ship designs. Their fighters are faster and more heavily armed than ours, but they rely too much on technology and not enough on pilot skill. Meaning? Meaning that human pilots who grew up flying in Earth's atmosphere, dealing with weather and mechanical failures and split-second decisions, are better trained for the chaos of real combat. Hayes looked around at the faces of her officers, both physically present and appearing via hologram. These were the people who would determine whether humanity's first interstellar rescue mission ended in victory or disaster. Ladies and gentlemen, in 48 hours, we will drop out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. The Kethamori will know we're coming, and they'll be ready for us. They have better ships, better weapons, and they've had months to prepare their defenses. She paused, letting the reality of their situation sink in. But they've made one critical mistake. They assume that because we're smaller and less advanced, we'll behave like the other species in the galaxy. Cautious, calculating, unwilling to take risks for strangers. Hayes activated the display showing the Volani homeworld as it had been before the attacks, a green, peaceful planet full of life and hope. They don't understand that humans have never learned how to abandon children in danger. They don't know that we've built our entire civilization on the idea that some things are worth dying for. And they're about to learn that when you threaten innocent people, you don't just face human ships and weapons. You face human fury. The briefing broke up with officers returning to their ships to make final preparations. Hayes remained on the bridge, staring at the countdown timer showing their arrival at the Kepler system. 47 hours and 36 minutes. She opened a personal communication channel to Earth, knowing the message would take months to arrive. General Stone, this is Admiral Hayes reporting from deep space. The fleet is performing well and morale remains high. We should arrive at the target system within 2 days. She paused, thinking about the children waiting on that distant world. Sir, I want you to know that every person in this fleet understands what we're fighting for. We're not just trying to save the Volani. We're proving that humanity stands for something bigger than ourselves. Whatever happens in the next few days, we'll make Earth proud. Hayes ended the transmission and returned to her command chair. Around her, the bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, preparing for the most important battle in human history. In 47 hours, they would learn whether human courage could overcome alien technology, whether determination could triumph over superior numbers, and whether love for innocent strangers could defeat the darkness that had consumed so much of the galaxy. The Volani children were waiting, and humanity was coming.